shape up.
Damn.
Oh man, next time I started it. Welcome back, fellow quarantined YouTubers. Today, James has been hard at work on our dash here, and it's actually starting to look pretty good. He got a router and a jigsaw that cuts this plastic he just had a sheet of handy.
That's from Menards, but yeah.
Okay, so we got this plastic, and he's been cutting out inserts to kind of fill all this up, and we, on the other dash, we had the airbag, like I guess fascia in here, but we're actually going to make it out of this now so that we can mount things to it. But yeah, we're out here not socially distancing as well as we should be, and working on this dash. But we do have hand sanitizer, and yeah, we are being relatively careful, but we've been around each other quite a bit since this whole thing started, so it is what it is. But yeah, I got to cut some wires today. James is going to be working on the dash a little bit today, and we'll see how far we can get. I'd like to have the main power for the car pretty well done today, so let's get busy. All right, so the last time we were out here, I kind of touched on this in the last two videos, but those holes down there, we got to plug two of them because we only have one positive coming through. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use yet. I think I'm going to end up using this one. There's a lot of holes in this firewall, so I still got to figure some stuff out there real quick, but I'm going to grab this ground cable out right here, and yeah, this ground, that's a lot, but anyway, pull that out. I got a couple other things to pull, and then I'll get around to putting the dash in the car, just kind of rigging the IP beam in and putting the dash pad on it, and kind of getting an idea of what length wire I need to cut to go from the main kill switch to the firewall lug, and from the firewall lug down to the battery. So if I get all that done, that'll be a pretty decent day. I need to make those cables as well, so it's going to be a lot of cable work today. I'm going to time lapse it while James cuts the dash out there. It's not wanting to focus. He is out there using another dash as a template to cut out panels for the one we're going to use, which is the one that I have currently. But yeah, right now, let's get busy. Start cutting some cables and cutting some plastic. Alright, so if you remember from the last video what this all looked like before I got my hands on it again, I cleaned things up, and this is the final result. Not that direction, that direction. Looks much better, much more robust, much more. It's now protected really well. The boots on it, this is a far cry from how it was before. We used some of the old parts. This was something new that I had built. The nut's not tight yet, so don't mind it moving around, but got the boot on there to protect that nut. It's looking pretty good. So now we got to do the inside of it.
This panel needs to be a little bit bigger, especially if I clean off the edge. I can take up a little bit more space, give it a little bit more structure.
Try to put the other vent back in there. Man, that looks good. We're gonna have the mic plugged in. It probably didn't hear you at all, but still. All right. Very nice, James. Good work. And Dan, I don't know if we told you yet, but we are no longer going to need oil pressure or oil temp or any of those gauges. We can run it all right to the HON data, and then we have another phone to put on the dash that will display all the HON data gauges. So everything will be a digital display right there. We can keep our gauges over here uninhibited. We don't have to worry about unhooking anything or getting oil inside the car or a leak or anything like that.
Okay.
And
Basically, we're just going off of the vehicle sensors.
what it sees, right? And then we'll have to run an input for those things, oil pressure, oil temp, but we can see boost, we can see our fuel mileage.
How does it calculate boost?
Map sensor.
Just map sensor?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it knows exactly what the manifold pressure is.
Okay.
So it'll tell us vacuum and everything too. But the other cool thing about it is it's got a built-in shift light. It's got it knows what gear you're in, so we can run the boost by gear. I'll have the solenoid hooked up, so
Sweet.
there's going to be like we can have 12 gauges in the space that one phone takes up. Alright, so I don't know if I talked everybody through this in the last video or not, but you guys just saw in the time lapse, it was probably really fast at the end, but I marked this ground cable out where I wanted to put it. It'll be well protected up in between the parking brake cable mount in the vehicle, and that's not an area that we commonly are walking around or shuffling around. So I made a little cut because I didn't have a silver Sharpie on me. I also don't have my proper wire cutters, so I'm going to make a cut with these scissors because that's ghetto and that's the way I like it. So these scissors actually do a really nice cut too. Little by little, squeeze it back into a circle, so it looks pretty good. All this cable is now for use in another project. Now we make our cut with the knife. Let's do our equation here. Oh no! Terminal's a half mile away. So, if we're gonna do this properly, measure our terminal, we get 11.42. We're gonna go ahead and call that 12. Add 10%, we add 1.2 millimeters, so that would be about 13. That doesn't seem like quite enough of a margin, so I'm gonna crank this up to about 15 millimeters. So we got 15 mils here. We need to score the cable where we're gonna cut it. Turn that off because the battery's already about dead. Make our cut down to the conductor. You'll feel it in the knife. As soon as you feel it, stop cutting because you are effectively making it smaller if you cut through your strands. Make a cut long ways to weaken it. And then twist it with the conductors as you pull it off. There you go. Okay, now we have to remember to put our shrink wrap on first because on the other end of the cable we have this. That won't fit over it. So let's go ahead and make this cut too. We had 12 millimeters or so, or 15, so we're going to crank this up to about 30. Give or take right about there. Doing this the wrong direction here. Give or take 30 mils right there. Take our hydraulic crimper, get our ring terminal in there and squared up. I like to make sure that it's level with the jaws in there, and then we'll give it a couple cranks, make sure it's tight. Then we will squeeze all of our conductors in there. Actually went really well. Make sure they're just past flush with the character inside that ring terminal that holds onto them. There's like teeth essentially in there, and you see we got a little bit of it sticking out on that side. That'll be a little bit of strain relief from the actual jacket of the cable itself. I'll crank this down until we got a pretty significant amount of pressure on it. Then as we cranked it, this isn't the perfect and most correct style of crimp, but it does work. However, you can see that terminal end is not in line with the cable anymore. Let me show you. So you see it's kind of angled down on the right side right here. So what we're going to do is straighten that up a little bit. That's about it right there. Release the pressure. Pull our terminal end up to about there and then hit it with some heat. Sometimes you gotta hold it in place until the adhesive starts to melt, that way it doesn't slide away on you. Considering this is a ground and the entire body of the vehicle is grounded, we don't have to put a boot on it. Chain power ground cable. Not bad, right? So let's go ahead and install this in the car on the mock-up battery. Don't mind the mowing noise. Dan is out there currently mowing the grounds. Oh, I just got in the car and forgot my cable. It's a story of my life. This, and I'll clean this up later, but this will be our ground point. The vehicle, our main chassis ground, it's dead center, right by the fuel pump. Dead center of the chassis, it's a really good spot to put it. I just loosened up the wrong bolt, it's embarrassing. Now I'll clean this up later to make it a proper ground. Probably get a stainless steel bolt. Now, it's one side of our chassis ground there. The battery will be sitting, give or take, right about there. I got it kind of rigged in here right now. So get that down in the corner there. There's one side. And the positive, I believe I'm going to have come over here, meet our negative where it exits the battery box. And then it'll run alongside the negative to right about there. Probably can't see it, right about here. They'll just be zip tied together, and they'll run up through the vehicle there. Let's go over the system. All right, so I know I do a lot of talking about the electrical systems in these cars, but it's definitely something you don't want to skip on. So I'm trying to show you a way to do it right. Make sure all your connection points on your positive side, if it's a positive ground chassis, if it's a negative ground chassis, make sure all your positive points are secured and safe, and make sure that everything is the way it should be. That way, while you're wrenching on something in a hurry during a race, you don't accidentally hit a socket handle on something, weld it to it, and then end up with a fire situation. So you want to make sure you do all this stuff right and put a couple extra bucks into it to make sure that you don't create a situation that could be bad later on. So that being said, let's look into how I built this, and then if anybody else has any opinions on what I should do, let me know. I'm open to suggestions. There's always something to learn from anybody, so let's go over it. Alright, so as you guys just saw, we made this ground. Dead center in the chassis. It's protected by these two parking brake cables, and you know, we don't step in this area right here. It's pretty well off limits to us. You can't really get there, and there's no reason to anyway. And then don't mind this wiring here from the vehicle. That stuff's all coming out and getting replaced, so just ignore that for now. But as you can see, our battery box, typically marine boxes was what we're supposed to use, has an exit on either side of the battery. So I brought both of the cables over to this side with a little bit of slack so we have some play if we need it. And they come together and they'll be kind of zip tied together to right about where they break apart right there. And then I'll put in some P-clips. I don't know if anybody knows what those are. They're like P-clamps. It's these guys right here. Let me get one off there. You can get these in many different sizes, I think all the way down to 1/4 inch. So you just bolt one side to the chassis and then you'll have your cables in there. So we'll be using a bunch of those to secure this cable on its way up to the front of the vehicle. It'll hug the contour of the center tunnel a little bit better than that, and then it will go up to the I guess you can call it like a junction lug up there. So you have battery positive into there constantly. On the other side of it, you have the alternator and the starter, so those are constantly connected to battery positive, and that's fine. Then there is a cable that goes north off of that lug there, and it comes over to the switch. It's the one on top there. That one is your battery positive to the vehicle. Then the cable underneath it runs to this fuse box, and then we'll run to the sub fuse box I have for the engine. Now, all of the power that controls your ECU power for the engine, which will be down there, your fuel pump, your ignition, all that other stuff, it all is in this fuse box. If you turn off the main kill switch, which is this guy here, or some version of it, you lose ignition power, fuel pump power, you lose your PCM power, so this will effectively kill the entire vehicle from that point right there. That should be just fine. So previously, almost every single piece of loomed wire that you see there in the larger loom and all of this exposed stuff, let's see if I can just pull this out here. That was battery to one switch, and then this was a chassis ground from firewall to the front frame. This was the other switch, and we only need one. And then this was another positive, I think, to the starter. There's a positive to a fuse box, another positive to the fuse box. I'm honestly surprised we didn't have any backfeeding in here. There's another large cable over there too, but essentially this is all the wire that was in the vehicle before, and now it's just two appropriately sized 4 AWG to the starter and the alternator, one single firewall lug passing through, and then through the firewall lug, we do have a longer cable to the battery. Move the battery. So that is a little bit longer. I believe the battery used to be right here. So we moved it back, we added about a foot to that, but we did shave off significantly the amount of cable that we had inside the dash itself. So I think this is a win-win. It's more appropriately sized, it's a little bit stronger, and then it's just, you know, I think it's a better system, and there was nothing wrong with the old system. I think there may have been a couple of circuits that didn't need to be there necessarily, but that just happens. There's a lot of generations of wiring on top of all of this stuff in the car. You know, this car went through 1, 2, maybe, I think we're the 3rd team this car's been on. So there's just been generations of wiring just piling up inside this thing. I mean, just crazy amounts of stuff. So we all made do with what we had, but I think now we've got a better, more fitted system. And I think the electrical is going to be pretty good this year, so we'll see. I don't know, who knows, I could burn the car down. It's hard telling, but for right now, it's looking good. Everything's looking good. So next step, let's put a shifter in. So we have this K-tune shifter that I'm extremely fond of here. This shifter we have in the car, it's a good shifter. I mean, it lasted us a season, but it's an aluminum eBay shifter, and China's aluminum casting, I don't think I need to say the rest of that. Anyway, not as robust as what K-tune made. Now, this thing still may be made in China, I'm not sure, but it is significantly more substantial. This is a badass shifter. So we're gonna get this in the car, and then later on in the season, once we get the seat back in there, which is up on top of that shelf right now, we get the seat back in there, I'll adjust this thing, but for now I'm gonna get it close. So let's go ahead and get this in the car and see how it turns out. Well, that sums up the day for the Champ car today. My phone died towards the end there while I was working on that shifter replacement, but I'll throw that and the power cables over this as I'm talking. But essentially, what it comes down to is that shifter is awesome. It fits well in the car, it looks well, it's going to work really well. And the power cables, they turned out really nice too. I'm pretty happy with them. I think maybe a little bit of adjustments needed, but shouldn't be anything major. Just kind of tidy things up and fit everything in there a little bit tighter. But yeah, just get some P-clips and get everything tightened down, and that should be it for main power on the car. And then we'll move into some of the more nitty-gritty of wiring up everything and making sure everything's got the logic I want when certain things are turned on, and just make sure everything's nice and the way we want it. So there's a couple of things that we need to happen when other things happen, so we just got to make sure the proper grounds are run where they need to be and power is run where it needs to be to make those things happen. So next up, we'll be getting into wiring some switches.